From the Moonbeam side, we have a huge benefit because we're fully EVM, so that gives us a really, really good head start. But we're always innovating with like pre-compiles and things like that because, Polkadot SDK is really modular, right? And so we can do things at a code level that the EVM, like our Ethereum, cannot do, right? And so we're working with things that are gonna help provide better developer experience, but also user experience at the end of the day, which is our goal, right? Because we wanna make sure that developers have the tools they need to provide really good user experience.
So I actually am a mechanical engineer. I did a PhD in internal combustion engines, but I've been involved in crypto since late 2013, really interested about the technology. I tried to run a Bitcoin miner in my laptop just for fun. But, I had my mechanical engineering career. I had to leave Venezuela where I was living because, situation there was not really great. So I found a PhD grant in Spain. I did 5 years doing internal combustion engine research. But I always had that thing in the back of my head. It's like, I was not a huge I was not passionate about it, right? It's where life took me, but it's not what I actually wanted to do. And so I started working at Nissan doing engine research. And that was like the tipping point in my life was like, this is not what I want, right? It was a moment that I decided to, take action on it. And my oldest brother actually had this connection with Derek Yu, the founder of Moonbeam. And yeah, he made the connection. And because I've been passionate about crypto for so long, I guess kind of Derek saw that in me. And he's like, do you want to work at DevRel? Because I'm also passionate about education. And, in the university, when I did the PhD, I loved like teaching and all that. And so, yeah, I joined the team in June 2020. And since I moved away from mechanical engineering, I've never looked back. And yeah, it's a super exciting space, to be honest. Decentralization is not black and white, right? It has many different flavors of gray because a lot of people say, yeah, this is decentralized or this is not decentralized. It's how decentralized it is, right? And so I would say Moonbeam went through the process of some flavor of decentralization in which now there's no like kind of typical structure when there's like a foundation and a labs. Right now, there's like a foundation and a series of satellite or constellation companies that each provide unique like skill set to the project, right? And so, I was leading DevRel at the labs company, let's say before, and so basically I was given the chance of like create my own company that does DevRel as a service. And so, the Moonbeam core DevRel team basically now keeps doing DevRel for Moonbeam, but as a satellite company, right? It was a process that took us probably a year, but it's something that it ended up, we did it correctly, I would believe, right? Because right now Moonbeam still exists, and now it's like the contributions are not done by a single company. It's just by a set of companies in all different fronts, right? There is a core development company, DevRel company, DevOps and app development and marketing, and so all basically have expertise in these fields, and they contribute to a single goal. It's the same as it was before, but now you have all these different legal entities working together, right? And so I would say it was a learning process for sure, and it's not something that is done, like I said, in a day. Communication is always key, right? Because now you have a multiple set of entities that are working together. And I think, like you kind of get the feeling where, where everything was streamlined into a single company, it was way easier. There's a clear structure of how everything works. And now when you have multiple companies contributing, you need to understand how it's going to be like reporting and how it's going to be working together. And so, yeah, it's a challenge, but I think it ends up being sort of like fruitful. PaperMoon, for example, is not bounded to a single project, right? So we work also, for example, with other projects in the ecosystem like Tanssi. And that's a good thing because it's not like, oh yeah, our attention is not only on Moonbeam. Now we get perspective from other experiences as well, which helps us, work with Moonbeam as well, right? And I think that's positive, and that's even positive for Polkadot as well, because now we don't have only the Moonbeam vision of things, we have also the Tanssi vision of things, and then we sort of can communicate and make sure there are synergies. I think one of the things that I've seen that it's really lacking in Polkadot is that you have teams that are acting like isolated silos, right? And in Polkadot, one of the core things is interconnectivity, working together, right? And that's something that, is not really being exploited. So when you have like teams like us that are working on both ends, you can start like connecting dots and say, okay, maybe Tanssi can leverage Moonbeam, for example, to bring liquidity into these app chains that Tanssi is going to build, right? And so you can see that there are some collaboration points because now we have perspective from both teams, and I think that's truly something that really was really fueled by this like decentralization push. So.
I have the background in traditional finance. I did hedge fund in Brazil for almost a decade, but I studied computer science, right? So that's one of the main reasons that made me get very interested in crypto. Like, I think that crypto is pretty much when this all converges, and that's what made me left the hedge fund industry. I think what we are seeing right now in crypto is pretty much like a once in a lifetime opportunity. I just think there's so much inefficiency in the traditional finance. There's so much opportunity that is generated with this inefficiency. Moondance Labs is the developer company developing the protocol Tanssi network, and in Tanssi we have a very interesting way to blend the benefits of an EVM chain with the capabilities of Polkadot, right? So we have an EVM template that's available in our app, and that's pretty much a fork of Moonbeam, right? So we leverage all the good things about Polkadot, all the technical features that I just described, also all the decentralization of Polkadot, which is incredible, right? So we have currently over 500 validators with, I would say, last time I checked, was about $4 billion at stake. So that's a very, very decent amount of security, and it's just very hard to replicate that, right? So we combine all this benefits, I would say, of running in Polkadot with the amazing work that Moonbeam guys have been doing in the last years by kind of translating the EVM environment into a substrate chain. So we have this template that allow a lot of new teams to deploy EVM chains and offer MetaMask to their users, and deploy Solidity smart contracts on top of the chains. So I think that's the best of two worlds. So the technical sophistication of Polkadot with the amazing productivity capabilities of Solidity and all the EVM environment. Our main product is a dApp on which you connect your wallet, you give some parameters. Let's say you want to deploy a EVM chain or a substrate chain. What's the name of the base token of the chain? What's the amount of decimals? What's the gas fee policy? These kind of things. Just give these parameters, click next, and at the end of the process, that takes, by the way, 10 minutes, which is super reasonable. We spin up a chain in a permissionless way already with the integrations to block explorers, indexers, RPC endpoints. I mean, all this tooling that's usually takes time, takes money. So we provide all of that already out of the box. Most of the co-founders of Tanssi, they were building Moonbeam before. And actually that's precisely in this time that the idea of Tanssi came to be, right? So in a sense, it could and should not be that hard to spin up a parachain, right? And that's the main motivation behind Tanssi, and that's why we created this codeless solution. So the idea is to reduce as much as possible the hurdles, the challenges to start a parachain or an app chain. Tanssi is this dApp, right, on which you can pretty much not only deploy, but also control the chain after you deploy. If you want to change the runtime of your chain and, I don't know, maybe amend the indexer, so I'm not using X indexer anymore, I'm using Y indexer, and I have to amend the runtime of the chain. So once I amend that, I can deploy the new runtime without a fork. That's a forkless updates capability. That's super interesting as well, especially for this use case. The notion that you can, leverage, in the case of Polkadot, right, you can leverage this whole set of validators, all this amount of security, while still having fully capability of customizing your chain, controlling your chain. About enterprise use cases, that's super exciting because they need a more controlled ecosystem, right? So that's a way to provide them control. Maybe they need a gasless chain. That's a way to customize the chain to provide a gasless chain. The powerful customizability that it's allowed in this whole framework. That's super exciting. Just to give some perspective, we currently have almost 50 chains in Polkadot ecosystem, and we already deployed 200 chains. So that's a very significant number for us. And the main use cases that we are seeing are pretty much like DeFi, gaming, but we have a lot of other stuff going on as well. We have decentralized identity protocols, DPIN, including enterprise use cases, which is super interesting as well. Tanssi was never meant to be like a focus in Latam, but it's just, we are seeing a lot of use cases, a lot of clients, a lot of people interested in what we are doing. And one team that we are particularly super excited about, it's called Viera chain. So this team, they are building a decentralized short-term credit receivable marketplace in Brazil. So just for context, there's a huge business in Brazil, which is discount receivables. And these receivables can be credit card installments or invoices or, any kind of short-term receivables, right? And what these guys are doing is that they are using blockchain and smart contracts, stable coins, all this infrastructure to discount those receivables in a more cost-efficient way. So what they do in practice is that they run almost like a private credit fund, but it's not a fund. It's just a bunch of smart contracts and code that kind of automate all this process. And what we figure out is that that's actually more efficient comparing to the TradFi methods. And then they said, well, maybe we should offer also the same operations for foreigners, right? Not only for Brazilians. So they created like a hedging mechanism for short term. So in a way that you can deploy your capital using USDC and it converts into a local stablecoin in Brazil, and then you can access this kind of operations. So that's a second product that is very complementary to the other one. And then they developed a third one, which is a staking platform for the local stablecoin that also is tied together with all their operations. So at the end, what these guys have is an actual platform with a lot of products that interact. And they said, well, why not to deploy all these products in one single chain? They combined all this loan structure with an offering provider. So at the end of the day, the regular merchant, they don't want to receive BRZ, which is the local stable coin, right? They want to pay salaries. They want to, this working capital. They want to replace the warehouse. So the way that they deal with that is that the whole workflow works in stablecoins, but at the end, like the last mile of the workflow is pretty much the off-ramp solution. And this off-ramp is paid using a settlement method in Brazil called PIX, which is 24/7, right? And the whole operation, it takes like a few hours, maybe one day. And also, like, just to give a perspective, before this kind of operations should take like 7 days or something like that. So what I like most about this use case is that the guys who are taking these loans that are powered by smart contracts and stablecoins are not, DeFi degens. They're, the streets around the corner, the TV resellers, the computer resellers, they don't even know the blockchain is backing all of that. And this is really like what we want, right? So enable day-to-day use cases, facilitating people's lives, right?
Both Moonbeam and Tanssi, they have a community of end users, right? But at the end of the day, they're infrastructure projects, right? They provide the foundational grounds so that developers can build products that then end users end up using, right? Definitely Moonbeam has a community, Tanssi has a community of end users that are participating directly or indirectly in the network because they have on-chain governance, they have staking mechanism. But at the end of the day, they should just mainly focus on providing the foundational grounds so that teams can build on top of, right? And I think Tanssi is doing a great job of abstracting so much complexity, right? Tanssi was founded by ex-Moonbeam members, and like they learned so much over the years that, it was basically like they can abstract so much of how complex Polkadot is for the good and the bad, so that now you can deploy your own L1, right? Not an L2, but an L1 powered by Polkadot in a matter of clicks, literally. I think almost anyone can do it, to be honest. And then how this works out, for example, with Moonbeam, that a lot of these teams will need, for example, liquidity, all right? And then, so for example, they can get that liquidity from Moonbeam, powered by XCM, which is just an interoperability language that it's native to Polkadot. And so we're seeing a lot of like synergies in which Moonbeam and Tanssi can work together. And us that we were working with DevRel. DevRel, I think one of the unique things about DevRel is that it's like a jack of all trades. So we're not core developers, right? But we know the technology very well, so that we can kind of connect the dots. we're not BDs, but we do a lot of technical BD, right? So we're like a little bit of everywhere without being super, super deep into each of these like verticals. And so the benefit of like going back to the benefit of decentralization is that we have this higher level technical vision of how everything works. So we can start sort of connecting the dots and making sure that, yeah, it's great. You're gonna be able to launch your app chain in 10 minutes. You're gonna be able to have oracles and indexers, but there are some things that it's really impossible to solve all the problems with Tanssi, right? So that's where Moonbeam can come in and sort of step in and say, okay, you need liquidity. Boom, we can give you liquidity. You need to access remote ecosystems that you cannot do directly from a Tanssi app chain. You can use Moonbeam to connect to all of that. We deal with a lot of Ethereum developers, right? Because Moonbeam is like an Ethereum compatible blockchain. And so a lot of people just really care that it works. That if you have a hard hat script or a Foundry script, you just point it to Moonbeam and nothing breaks. That a lot of people just really dig that. Then we sell things like, for example, finality. Everyone is building on L2s because it's a hot thing, right? But they don't really think about what building an L2 means. Building an L2 means that you are dependent on an L1 for security. And in this case, Ethereum has 15-minute finality, right? And so when you're talking about what finality means, finality is immutability, right? Your transaction cannot be reverted. It's now there forever. And so depending on the application, you might not really care, right? But depending on the application, you might care. So I would say some projects we do the pitch about L1. We're on L1, we're not L2. In 20 seconds, your transaction is immutable. So if you're gonna do cross-chain stuff, you should not go for an L2 because in cross-chain, all the GMP protocols or the bridges are going to wait 15 minutes to pass your message to another chain, right? So depending on the application, that's going to provide a really bad user experience. We are built on a very modular tech stack that it's Substrate or Polkadot SDK, so that allows us to be not only EVM equivalent, but also provide things beyond EV, like the standard EVM implementation, right? We've seen a lot of teams dig into this because they can provide things that are not possible on Ethereum compatible chains that provide better user experience and better developer experience as well. So that is only possible because we're built with the modular framework that Polkadot SDK is. So there's no one answer, to be honest. It's just you adapt your pitch based on the technology or the solution they want to do, right? So a lot of builders that are building applications on top of Polkadot, for example, on Moonbeam, really need to understand that they don't have to understand Polkadot, right? And like they just Polkadot is a blockchain in which you literally theoretically cannot build applications on top of, right? It's a blockchain for security, for interconnectivity, but it's not a blockchain that you're going to go and build a game on top of. And so Polkadot relies on parachains, right? So that parachains is where the applications live. And so a lot of people think that Polkadot is extremely complex. It is, but they need to understand that when you build on Moonbeam, you're building on Polkadot, right? And you can leverage all things that Polkadot has to offer, but you don't really have to understand, like the complexity of how Polkadot works. And so one of the things that I think we need to do better as an ecosystem is that, or we're not really taking advantage of the full potential that this interconnectivity has to offer, right? And so one great example is that Moonbeam has integrations with like Open Sampling Defender, Gelato, which is like, they provide like an infrastructure for automation, right? But they're centralized, right? There are companies that provide this as a service. But then you have Oak Network, which is a centralized network, right? Fueled by Polkadot that does this in a trustless and decentralized way, right? So one of the things that I would love to see, I would love to see this is that imagine you're in an application on Moonbeam and you have a little widget floating. It's like, hey, automate this action powered by Oak Network, right? And the user just clicks it, signs a transaction, and that's it, right? So these sort of like seamless sort of flows that you're using two blockchains, but the user doesn't really have to care that they're using two blockchains, right? To power these like experiences is what I think we're lacking, right? We've done really cool things at Moonbeam that it's sort of like, it starts not exploiting in a good way, these kind of things. So we have one thing called MRL. So MRL is a way that any parachain on Polkadot can get liquidity from Ethereum, AVAX, whatever chain Wormhole is connected to, in a one-click action on the way in and out. And I'm not going to go into technicalities, but the way that this works is it's using XEM, is using Moonbeam's EVM, and is using a lot of really interesting tech that only Polkadot offers to provide one-click experiences for users. Right? And I think we have to keep sort of like building relationships and sort of connect with teams building on Polkadot so that they start sort of deploying tech so that it abstracts all the complexity that Polkadot offers to developers so that end users can have seamless experiences like the example that I did with Oak. So. I think the first step has to be that applications start using blockchain without forcing users to use blockchain, right? And then slowly, you have to sort of welcome them to embrace the technology so they understand what are the benefits, right? So one analogy that I'd like to give is that I'm not that old, but I did live in an era where you had to sort of like connect to internet with like a modem. And my mom would pick up the phone and like my internet would be dead. And I was like, oh Jesus, it's like internet was a hard experience early on. It's not fluid. There is like the internet was not that fast. I would play a Cartoon Network game and it would take like 5 minutes to load. So I would just go and get some water, come back. Oh no, it's still 50% out. And nowadays, you take out your phone and you unlock it and you don't even think about it. You like internet now is like a given, like in almost any part of the world, right? And so I think blockchain will follow that natural evolution, right? I mean, a lot of people today, like young kids today, don't even think about connecting to the internet, right? Like they get a phone and they just believe the internet is built into the phone, right? But we come from an era where we sort of suffered that part, right? When you have to like connect, when we have to buy another phone line in my house so that, if my mom would like to call my grandma, the internet wouldn't go down and these kind of things. And so I think adoption will happen kind of in the same kind of way, right? So you're going to first build on blockchain, but the user might not interact with blockchain, but then you're going to give them the option of like, hey, if you want to sort of like start getting more exposure, like you're going to have to, like, you have the possibility. I'm really pro self-custody, for example, and wallets and stuff like that. But I'm a technical person, right? So I understand how things work. And I have to deal a lot in the day-to-day with people that are not technical and they don't really understand what a wallet means. And so imagine this for 3 billion people, right? And so I think that's why this natural evolution of like slowly getting them onboarded, and so they are educated and they sort of start understanding the fundamentals. It's a stepping stone, and for me, it's a natural evolution that we'll see.
Blockchain is a piece of software, right? And a piece of software is meant to create, efficiency. And blockchains are optimized for efficiency and security. Maybe it's not the cheapest infrastructure, but it's the safest. So that's really what excites me a lot. That's why we are building Tanssi, and we just want to provide the easiest and safest infrastructure possible for allowing these use cases in Appchains. And Polkadot 2.0 project is going to be reducing significantly as well the financial hurdle to deploy the chains. So it's going to be a way more capital efficient method to access block space in Polkadot. So we really believe that like combining two things, Tanssi and the Agile core time, we're going to see a lot of cool things emerging in Polkadot ecosystem.
We're building at the edge of technology, right? It's like I come from an industry, the engine industry, that if you see like the development path of an engine, they're just like pushing now for like very, very little tiny gains here and there, and you're spending millions of dollars of making the engine 0.01% more efficient. And that's where you like have to stop and say, what are we doing here, right? And so that industry for me was really tiring. And then you go to work in blockchain, where every week there's something new that is like miles like ahead, and the technology is evolving so fast, and everything is moving so fast, and Polkadot is building at the edge of the technology. It's crazy to think like for example core times and all agile core times and stuff like that, and you're like, crap, this is really like sort of like the edge of how everything's working on crypto, right? And I'm not even like going into CK stuff. It's just like it's really unbelievable to see, for example, go back only 5 years and come back to today, and you're like, the amount of stuff that's been developed in 5 years in blockchain is just mind-blowing.
Tanssi was always meant to be a protocol that unites block producers and teams that need to produce blocks. It's a codeless solution. You just give some very simple parameters like the name of the token, the amount of decimals, if that's an EVM compatible chain or a substrate native chain. Next, boom, 10 minutes, your chain is up, running,